the closures. The research body says if Australia's borders remain shut for even longer, the government will have no choice but to increase support for the sector. And joining me now live is McKell Institute Executive Director Michael Buckland. Michael, thank you for joining me. $16.4 billion cost. How did the report arrive at that figure?
Well, we looked at the amount of economic activity our aviation industry supports, but we assume that it won't bounce back straight away. It's going to take time to bounce back. And, we'll see a reduction in travel, a reduction in international students attending our universities for some time yet. But still, every day that we get started is a day closer to returning to that new normal. And so what we've done is forecast that at our current rate of vaccination, we're expected to open international borders 81 days later than originally planned. And that's a $16.4 billion reduction in economic activity.
And even if the vaccine rollout does speed up, how long will it take to get the economy back on track?
Well, I think we've shown so far that we've been remarkably resilient at coming back rather quickly when restrictions ease. But we also know that restrictions come back very quickly. We've seen it in WA just a couple of weeks ago, and in Sydney right now, restrictions just from a couple of cases a few days ago. But the chances of those restrictions being implemented by our leaders reduces substantially when you have a vaccinated population. And that's why the McKell Institute is looking very closely at our rate of vaccination and how quickly we can get back on track. Because the sooner we get ourselves vaccinated, the sooner we'll be able to bounce back.
And even when the international border does open, is there a risk that Australians could get stuck overseas? We look at the current situation right now in India. Does this add to the uncertainty?
I think it does add to uncertainty, but the best thing for Australia to do right now, Australia had planned to resume international travel around October. Qantas was taking flight bookings at that time, and the government said that so long as we had a vaccinated population and the vaccine reduced transmission rates, that we'd be able to get ourselves back up and running. I think people are still going to be stuck overseas, but that's why we need to have a vaccination program that allows people who are vaccinated to travel in and out regardless of restrictions. And once we get that, once we have a certain amount of our population vaccinated, we'll be able to get there. And I think that so long as the government's shown that they, even with this India travel ban, within a couple of days, things have changed track, and now we are repatriating our citizens. And so I think that we have the capacity to do this. The question is whether or not is when we'll get started doing it.
Next week's budget, of course, will be handed down. Are we likely to see the impact of the delays to the vaccine reflected in the figures?
Well, every day of delay in the vaccine means an increasing joblessness within the aviation industry and the industries it supports. So we're talking about tourism. We're talking about live trade as well. Things that are dependent on our aviation industry. And so every day the international borders remain closed, we suffer as an economy, and that means smaller tax intakes, means larger amounts of debt, more jobless, and I mean these things all affect our recovery. And so it's great that we've started planning for opening in October, but if we continue at the current rate, we're not going to get there.
All right, well, remains to be seen. Michael Buckland, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.